I've noticed that many players struggle to understand block strings or how block pressure works in general. Players seem to do block strings out of habit without creating any pressure. On defense, these players often try to mash out of strings at seemingly random times without having a real plan. In this video, I'm going to explore the different types of block strings and how you can use them to create pressure. This will help you to open up your opponents easier. On defense, knowing this information is vital to ensure that you can correctly understand and respond to the situation. A block string is any combination of moves performed while the opponent is blocking. It can be helpful to break it down into 3 types. A true block string is completely gapless. The opponent is in block stun the entire time. This means that even if the opponent tries to press a button, nothing will happen. In Street Fighter 6, if you block one part of a true block string, you'll automatically block all of it, although you do still need to correctly block high or low. A frame trap has a gap that is too small for the opponent to interrupt. This means that if they try to press a button, they'll be counter hit. Frame traps are a fundamental tool for creating mix-ups. More on that later in the video. A fake block string has a gap which is large enough for the opponent to interrupt. These will lose to a mashing opponent, but become an option once you've conditioned your opponent to block using frame traps. I'll now talk about each of these in detail to explain how they're used. True block strings are mostly used for special cancels and burnout strings. They can be used for chip damage, either to the opponent's drive gauge or directly to their life in burnout. True block strings can be useful to create a high-low mix-up. For example, Ken players often cancel Heavy Punch into Jinrai to create an uninterruptible string that leads to a mix-up. True block strings can also be used for pushback, either to move the opponent to a more favourable spacing or in some cases to create spacing traps. I'll explain spacing traps later. Frame traps are at the core of many characters' game plans. They have a built-in layered mix-up. They condition the opponent to block or get hit by a counter-hit combo. When doing a frame trap, make sure you know a counter-hit combo for the move you're frame trapping into to maximise damage. Once the opponent is blocking, you can end the string early and go for a walk-up throw. If the opponent is consistently teching when you do this, they're likely delay teching and you can shimmy them for massive damage. The opponent may also be attempting to walk back to avoid your throw. In this case, you can hit them with a low. Once the opponent is conditioned to block, in addition to going for a strike throw mix-up, you can also attempt a fake block string. If your opponent thinks you're going to do a frame trap, then they likely won't interrupt your fake string. Fake block strings are powerful. You can use them to string into your best pressure starter, or a heavy move which deals a lot of damage to the opponent's drive gauge. You do have to be a little careful depending on how much the opponent is respecting your pressure. If the opponent is never trying to interrupt, you can attempt Stagger Pressure. This is where you repeatedly press plus on block moves, all the while chipping away at their drive gauge. Since the move is plus, you can at any point decide to do a frame trap instead of another plus move. At some point, the opponent will have to try to interrupt, but the risk of a frame trap is always present. Stagger Pressure is an advanced option that relies on the opponent understanding the situation. It's not something you need to worry about if you're still a beginner. If all of this talk of being plus has confused you, I do have a video on frame data which I'll link in the description. When your block string ends, it's usually the end of your turn. It's possible to use spacing traps to create situations where it's hard for the opponent to take their turn. In some cases, your block string will push the opponent too far for their move to connect. If they try to press a button, they'll whiff and you'll be able to whiff punish them. There are counters to spacing traps. For example, you can use a slower button which reaches further, although that may open you up to getting counter hit. Through spacing traps, some characters are able to create mix-up situations even when their turn is technically over. Characters like Ed and Bison are particularly good at creating these situations. I've covered a lot of topics in this video, but I've tried to avoid going off on too many tangents. If there's anything you'd like to see me talk about in more detail, let me know. Thanks for watching, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you all next time.